My name is Jane Brien. I'm the class of 1989. I'm the Director of Alumni Affairs, and this is the third time that Leon and I have spoken on a Q&A with all alumni. And I am delighted that we can be back. I think we're in week 9, which seems obscene, but true. And we asked for some questions before, Leon, and then people are also going to be putting some questions in the, they will put them in our question box. But
thank you.
I'm going to start with a question. I'm going to start right in with an alum question. Comes from Transylvania, and from Elizabeth Askren, who I believe you would know her. She's a conductor, MFA.
Yes, yes.
Conducting.
Yeah.
And she wants to ask, in light of the COVID-19 crisis and the post-COVID era, what future do you see for the orchestra concerning training, its programming, its public, and its purpose? Furthermore, how can conductors equip themselves to respond to these seismic shifts and remain effective and relevant leaders?
First of all, it's a very thoughtful question and a very pertinent question. So I have only fragmentary responses, and so let me try to be quick because it's a big question. We could spend the whole time on it. Number one,
Sure.
There is no future for the orchestral choral opera tradition except in real person. Or there is no, for our art form, there is no technological exit. And we can't actually develop an online platform the way we might to teach organic chemistry or the history of philosophy or something, even a language. So we are dependent on the resumption of public culture and public life. In other words, we can't do what the sports teams might be able to do, which is to play and then for viewers to watch it remotely. The problem is that we're dependent on an acoustic experience that these machines can't deliver. There's no amount of technological sound reproduction that can match an orchestra and chorus singing the B minor Mass of Bach. It just doesn't work out that way, much less a Mahler symphony or a Verdi opera. So number one, number two, we had a fight on our hands to maintain the adult public, and that we were losing that fight before the pandemic. And we don't have state support, and our audience is going to be the most reluctant to return to public life. They're not 21-year-olds who want to go back to a social life. They're people over the age of 60 who are at the most at risk in terms of their behavior. So the challenges facing orchestral music are enormous. What we are doing, what I believe we all need to do, is to use this time to develop new audience, use the online platform to reach out to publics we don't always get to create programs that reach families, so that people are at home, that put material up that creates a demand for what we can do when it's all over. And finally, to the Orchestra Now, which is our graduate program, everybody is there. We're actually over-enrolled for the next season. And we expect that beginning in late August, we'll be able to do outdoor events while the weather is still good. And by the time the weather doesn't get so good, we'll be able to go back indoors. And the first stage is probably going to be performances in orchestral groups that are under 50. So we'll divide the orchestra into 2. And we'll do stuff that you can get online and streamed. And then eventually the audience will be let in. So we do have a plan. This is subject of real personal concern for me, in the sense that, having spent the greater part of my life fighting for this art form, this is the most fierce enemy, I feel like. The character in the Lord of the Rings, who has to fight ever more powerful demons, and this is a tough one, and but we'll make it. But the most important is to use this time productively to somehow communicate with the audience out there. And people in theater at Bard have done very well through the Mad Forest. It's a good example.
Yeah, that was just had a review in the New York Times. It's on off-Broadway. Maybe not everybody knows about that.
Yeah, and we're planning to do something in music in late August that would be really designed for video transmission, but would be live outdoors, and it could actually possibly, depending on the state regulation, have a kind of a social distance audience.
Okay. So this past weekend, if I'm not mistaken, that was the first time in 45 years that you didn't have a graduation to go to on Memorial Day weekend.
Yes.
And I just wanted to know how that was for you, and was there any part that you missed the most out of that weekend?
Well, those are wonderful weekends. What I missed most were the thrill and joy of the graduating seniors and their families, and the pride in their achievements, and the feel of the place gathered together in an unalloyed sense of achievement. These are very important rituals. I understand why the religious communities are chomping at the bit to return to a community form of worship. I can pray to my God alone, but there's when you are in a church and people stand up and sing, or when, God forbid, someone should die, and in the Episcopal tradition, which we hear, which is rooted here at Bard, and there's the person you are saying goodbye to, and the priest goes down the aisle and says, "I am the resurrection and the life," and you walk down. That is a ritual, spatial, emotional experience you can't have on video, and you can't celebrate the Eucharist on video. You can't read the Torah to the community from the bima of a synagogue. And I'm not talking about religious fanatics here. I'm talking about community. And that was commencement. One of the nicer parts of commencement, I used to go every year. I will go again at 2 a.m. with one of my daughters to the 10 party, at 2 o'clock in the morning. And sort of the sense of accomplishment and having passed through the stage of life. So it was an extremely discouraging weekend to live through, but we're going to have a commencement at the end of August, and it'll be different, but it needs to be done.
Right. And one of our questions in the chat was, and I know the answer to this, but this commencement that we're going to have in August, we hope, is also reunions. So it will have all the reunion features.
Oh, yes, absolutely, yes.
And all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're able to house, we would be able to house alumni the way in comparable ways, because there will be some flexibility owing to the date in which the semester is scheduled to reopen.
Right. Okay. We have a question about how important is the face-to-face interface for the pedagogy? Could you foresee colleges increasingly going purely online? Is this something Bard will do or not do?
No. So the overwhelming message, despite journalistic glee at publishing the opposite, is that the data coming out of this semester is that the online experience has absolutely no capacity to replace the in-classroom experience. In fact, for us, the online experience has worked. Everybody finished in the class of 2020. Amazing. Finished their senior project and so forth and so on. The takeaway from this all was that because we knew our students, we could convert to online. So if you have a relation with your family, with your siblings, with your parents, with your children, with your neighbors, and you go online, you can have a Zoom birthday party with your own family. That's possible, but if it's not your family, you've never met the person before, the possibility of forging a personal relationship in this way as a teacher and student is very hard. So the takeaway from this experience is overwhelming that the communal living residential experience is indispensable. So this has damaged the utopian or dystopian, depending on your point of view, vision that the future will be online. So number one. Number two, it's taught us how to use the technology so that in a classroom, right, when we go back to the regular, so-called, so to speak, format, we will be able to use this technology in a much more effective way than we did before. I mean, we sort of had an idea was there, but nobody really thought that carefully about it. Now we have an experience of what works, what doesn't work. Certain things, we can do online. There are certain kinds of individual conversations that can be had with much more efficiently and effectively with a student. There's more tutorial work. Tutorials used to be a big burden. To make an appointment and the person went to your office. It was a harder thing to do. This is easier. A certain kind of question answering is better. Some communication among and between students can be facilitated by the technology. So there are some supplemental things at the margins. This technology has taught us to use and which can improve what we do. But no, there is no, learning is a human exchange. It is, and in music, we know that that's the most important lesson, that when you're listening to a person play and that person is prepared for a lesson, and the sense of reward that is built up with a relationship with one's teachers, anybody, any musician I know, any scholar I know, will go back to the importance of the human relationship between themselves and their teachers. As many people know, I had the privilege of being a student of two of the great political theorists of the 20th century, Judith Shklar and Hannah Arendt, and their personalities, their presence in real time and real place, and not through this medium. And the motivation that I had as a obnoxious adolescent to gain their praise for the work I did, to see them teach, lecture, answer questions, to learn by observation the way you would by being an assistant to a great artist, how they paint and how they work and how they think. We were not made for incarceration and isolation and communication through a cold virtual medium. That's not learning, that's not teaching, that's not a community of scholars.
Right. I think we have a few more questions here. We have one about, has Bard ever thought about offering an MFA in a science writing degree? Apparently it's something only 5 other schools offer, and COVID-19 highlights the great need for public science journalism. Given our strengths in writing and science, could the college play a role?
It's a great idea. It's a great idea, and I appreciate it. It's a great idea, and I don't have an answer. Let me check it. We do have an MFA, as you know, and but it doesn't go into the. We don't actually have, I don't think, an MFA opportunity for nonfiction writing in general, let alone the science. There might be something in the Center for Environmental Policy, but let me actually, I think Malia Dumont is on the call. She's an alumna of Class 95 and my chief of staff, and I would ask her to follow up, first of all, with the questioner, and then to raise it, to put it on the agenda. We are actually looking at new things we can do. We are offering enrollment now at a reduced cost to adults over the age of some technical numbers, either 26 or 27, who didn't finish college or want to start college now in this period of unemployment. And in order to strengthen their capacity to have a career and earn a living. And so we are opening the college up to adults in the area to go back to school, taking the issue of cost off the table. I think one can expect, given the massive economic shock that we're experiencing, that more and more, particularly younger adults, but some older adults too, will want to go back to school. And so we have to find a way to make it possible for them to do so. But this idea, which is this MFA, is a very good idea. I just don't know enough about the economic demand, and whether an MFA in nonfiction writing, for example, which would have tracks in it, in other words, where people, and one of them being science, the other might be the arts even, to raise the level of writing about these fields. It's a very well taken point, and I thank the questioner for it.
Well, you know who I will tell you who the questioner is later. Somebody who actually used to work for the college. So
don't tell me don't tell me someone who wrote a book recently.
Susan D'Agostino.
Yes, in fact, I wrote a blurb. I wrote a blurb. It's a wonderful book. Excellent. A wonderful book. She did a fantastic job about demystifying mathematics, and I was very honored. She wrote me about whether I'd write a supportive blurb. What a wonderful talent, what a wonderful career, and one of the alumni about whom we are incredibly proud, and she was a wonderful colleague as well. Yeah, she has a gift about this and on this subject, and I think we should try to sell the book to every alumnus and alumna.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah, no, it's a very well taken point. Susan has she's on to something. Yeah,
that's great. We have a sort of broad question from somebody who's asking, what are your views on the post-COVID world?
Well, uncharacteristically, probably for most of the alumni, my views are silence. I don't know. I simply don't know. I have had many sleepless nights about what the post-COVID world, a kind of nightmare scenario, that American democracy completely unravels. I'm alarmed by the direction that Washington has taken. I'm alarmed at the indescribable character of the behavior of the person who occupies the Oval Office. I'm also alarmed by the behavior of many governors, a kind of glint of, we're caught between two poles of chaotic deceit and vulgarity, and a kind of flirtation with authoritarian cult of personality. The possibility that, for reasons I can't fathom, there is a right wing in the country that grows powerful in its flirtation with conspiracy theories, and those who also want to limit access to the polls. So you can create, amidst an economic unraveling, by which the poor are dying of COVID and the populations of color are most affected, and then apparently the wealthy are building their own swimming pools. So you have a kind of a monstrous nightmare on the one hand, and then you have a more benign utopian one where people will come out of this with a renewed and chastened view of how precious the things we had. Oh, that was the argument behind Tolkien, or the hobbits and the Shire, to which, after all, the fear is pretty banal, and banal, and they're simple virtues. It's not, that's why I'm not that sympathetic to Tolkien. I don't quite get the aspirational part of it. I understand how bad evil is, but the good seemed a little on the weak side. And maybe we'll come back to a time when the good has a little tougher definition, that we cherish privacy and intimacy, that we take care of the people we love, that we shed. It was one of the only redeeming features of the counterculture of the 60s and 70s, the world of Woodstock and all that, was that it traded in the importance of affection and love in human relationships, mm-hmm. and not money and power and wealth. It tried in a helpless way to suggest there are other ideals in how we define success in life. And maybe that'll come out in a post-COVID world. I don't know.
These are two questions. Somebody's asking, is BARD contemplating long-term structural changes to its business and education model in light of the pandemic?
Well, the biggest change the answer is it has to always be vigilant about it. It can't be stuck in the mud. There are certain things that are not up for grabs. So things like moderation, the first year experience, L&T, senior project, and sort of the BART curriculum. So it's I think this experience has told us we're not going to flee from residential undergraduate liberal arts education. Where the business model needs constant positive change is looking at where the college can function in ways that make it more secure and more important. So we're going to expand the BARD High School Early College network in some way. Exactly how that works, we don't know. There's a real demand in the post-COVID world to rethink the bridge between middle school and higher education, secondary school, the young adolescent. There is going to be some, foray into adult education using technology. We have to think about the way the arts and international education can be done. And the Open Society University Network, which we are in the leadership of, is going to be an increasing part of our business model as we become a part of a different kind of international network that does rely on this technology, by the way. That's one of the things that technology has shown us, that we can do that better. So there are some things that should improve. What the country needs is a complete rethinking of its higher education policy. It needs, in the post-COVID world, to, in my view, get rid of the existing loan burden and refinance all the public universities the way President Lincoln did in creating them in the land grant in the 1860s, the Morrill Act, and it needs to restructure the government's relationship to higher education by providing much stronger support for young people destined for college. So that's not a fight in which we have a particular role to play. But yes, and the good and bad news for the entire alumni is that without the philanthropic support, the business model that many of you experience as students, in which you had at various times in the college's history, the impression that what you paid for what you got. In other words, that, when I first came to Bard, only a small fraction of the budget was paid for by gifts, with all tuition and fees, which means an angry student who said, I paid XYZ and I don't have, this, had a kind of what I would say, customer retail relationship. I bought this car, I paid, X dollars, and it doesn't start, that kind of attitude. That's not happening now. Now, of every dollar we spend providing education, from tuition and fees from individuals, not from the government, amounts to 40 cents. 60 cents comes from some elsewhere, right? So, the contribution of tuition has been declining and declining and declining and declining and declining, which is why the contribution from philanthropy has to increase. That's why we're very grateful to our major donors and to the leadership, the 100% participation by the board and by its chair, Jim Chambers, who's been fantastic, in keeping the college in the black and running. So that's going to continue, that no private college, whatever its business model is, will survive, unless it's the University of Phoenix. It becomes a profit-making, but we're not at that level of quality. And we don't measure everything by money. So we're going to continue to teach classics, Greek and Latin, English literature, American literature, African history, things that are not popular subject matter out there, and not only give degrees in what is popular or profitable. So yeah, we have to look at this, and the changes will make life better, but they're not going to solve the need for the college to have its own capital reserves and philanthropic support.
Right. One of our alum has asked about you mentioned OSIN and the assault on, he says, given assaults on fledgling democracies and individual freedoms around the world, have any of Bard's operations abroad suffered unfortunate direct consequences? I think he's sort of in relation to what happened in Hungary. Have we had any restrictions or problems with any of our campuses?
Not directly the result of COVID, but the question is a very good one. And we do work in we're on a very delicate, how should I say, it's a balancing act in places where there is not the same protection of the freedom of expression and academic freedom as there is in the United States law. Now, we have our own problems with academic freedom and freedom of expression in the United States, but those freedoms are less from the law than from below, from intolerance, from polarization. If you say something controversial, you're hounded to death, either in a public forum or on the internet. That it is horrifying, and I speak from personal experience, of the experience of vilification, personalized vilification, to the point of threats to one's safety that one gets for expressing an opinion that outrages a minority of fanatics who have had access to the internet and can bully you into silence. And that's something we experience in the name of freedom. But in places that are different, where the threat comes from above, from tyrannical government, we have always negotiated a fine line. And that's true in China, it's true in Vietnam, it's true on the West Bank, it's true in Kyrgyzstan, and it's true in Russia. We have chosen to be in tough places to fight for the improvement of freedom of expression, and not in easy places where it's already a given. So we don't have a program in Florence because there's no margin of achievement. No one's going to talk the Italians into something they don't already believe. Yeah, we're in Berlin, that's fine. But we were given that campus and we've made something terrific out of it, but we wouldn't have started there we went to places where we're needed. And so we're still fighting a kind of a sumo wrestling kind of jockeying, pushing on the expansion of freedom in places where the situation is gray and murky. Now, the COVID hasn't particularly made the task harder, so it's not. That's a constant struggle, not related to this particular crisis.
Yesterday, I was watching you at an all-staff meeting, and we were talking about BARD's role in the region and the commitment to those who work here, and also the role of the arts that BARD offers to the area. So I just thought maybe the alumni would want to know. I don't know that they know how much of an engine BARD is for this area, and we have not had anybody furloughed or so maybe you could talk about that for a second.
So on a purely cash terms, $200 million flows through the college every year. And that doesn't count the amount per capita the enrollment spends. Everything from chewing gum to gasoline to burritos from the truck that used to arrive in the spring here in recent years. And that makes the college the single largest employer, because 80% of that 200 million is wages and salaries. We're a people business. We don't actually consume lots of raw materials or produce, parts for engines. We're not in that business. So the multiplier effect that economists talk about is in the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars a year. The summerscape, the arts that we do in the summer, in the last couple of summers, we've had, if you include the CCS, that is to say, the Hessel Museum, we've had 50,000 visitors during the summer. And those 50,000 people eat in restaurants, they buy stuff, they wander around Rhinebeck and all of that. We're the single largest factor local factor in the real estate values around here. I guess if you asked many of the people who moved up in the last 10 years why they bought a house in Tivoli or in Germantown or Saugerties or around Kingston, especially Kingston, we're a magnet. And why choose come here as opposed to, say, the Berkshires? Or further up Route 17 is because we are a cultural magnet, the Fisher Center, the activities, the library, the gym even. So we're indispensable for the well-being. One of the reasons, actually, for those older alumni, we actually went in the direction of building the Fisher Center and creating the Center for Curatorial Studies, and did finally accept the responsibility of buying Montgomery Place, is that the local citizenry, the people who live here, who have their employment here, we're not a bedroom community and hope we never become one, that, especially Kingston, that there was an appeal for BARD to become a destination for cultural tourism. And so you combine what we do and the money spent, the survival of the college and its well-being is vital. So we have, as you suggest, maintained full employment. We've had a freeze on wages for everyone. And I myself have taken a 20% cut in pay as a gesture of the importance of austerity. I've asked no one else to do so. And anybody else who wishes to, I've encouraged them to give gifts to the college. So they should draw their regular salary, but there's no cost of living increase. And, we're headed for a rough sailing through this crisis. But our well-being is vital to a very large and spread out community that extends into the Catskills, north to south of Albany, and to lower Dutchess and Ulster County.
Well, I'm certainly appreciative that this is my 22nd year working here at Bard. There have been some questions. People have read the recent articles in the New York Times and regarding a Title IX lawsuit, and students, alumni are asking a little bit of the sort of backstory of what happened, because they've only read what they've read. So if you could speak to that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope everyone understands that I'm limited by the I don't want to speak in a way that gets in the way of the proper pursuit of the college defense against the lawsuit that was filed. So the facts that are a matter of public verification. So I'm not telling you anything that couldn't be found in the public record. A quarter-time faculty member taught 1 day a week, who was brought on in the college's effort to expand its music programs, offering outside of the European, North American fashion we considered the aesthetics of dead white people, the proper expansion of its range included the hiring of this quarter-time appointment, who is a Latinx, non-Latinx extraction and identity. And that individual taught here, was very charismatic and successful. In 2014, 2 students put forward a Title IX complaint, which was investigated according to Title IX regulations at the time. And the investigation was thorough, and the recommendations were, I would say, murky. They gave the option of the college to dismiss the individual or to give the individual a second chance, put the individual on probation, make restrictions, retrain the individual. You know, we're an educational institution. We believe in second chances. And there's a person without any prior history, and the nature of the investigation and the character of what was alleged and found gave the college some latitude in how to respond under the rubric of Title IX. I chose to dismiss the individual at that time. And there was an appeal. Every decision like that has an appeal. And in the appeal, there was a tremendous student outcry. The outcry at the time, in 2014, was directed at the popularity of this particular course, the ethnic identity of the instructor, and the accusation against the college that it was discriminating in its being unfair, that's a more draconian to a non-white person, and that the college's actions could be misinterpreted as racist on many accounts. And in the appeal process, the outpouring of student support for the individual instructor led to the college backing off and reinstating the faculty member with a limited, the best we can do by surveillance and retraining, and obviously being admonished. He came very close to losing his job. This year, another student filed a complaint. That complaint was investigated, and the allegations of the complaint and the findings led to an unequivocal recommendation that he be dismissed, and we dismissed the individual. In our view, we acted properly and judiciously. However, my parents, as many of you know, were physicians, and they used to joke that the most reliable medical instrument is the retrospectoscope. As everybody knows, we know this from BPI. One of the reasons BPI is so celebrated is because it has dropped the recidivism rate, from a very high percentage of people who are incarcerated to a very low percentage through education. There is recidivism, and giving people second chances is a risk you take, whether you're a judge or you're a professional law enforcement person, a parole board, or anybody in my position. So this turns out, in retrospect, to have not ended well, but the college dismissed the instructor right away. So the family has alleged that we are responsible for the incident because we insufficiently protected current students from the present danger of this individual's remaining on the faculty. I think that's more or less the idea. We contest that, and so they have every right to sue us, and we have every right to defend ourselves, which college is insured and has very good legal support. And in my opinion, and their opinion, I'm not a lawyer, the legal precedent makes their case very weak. The college spent considerable time, money, and adhered to every detail of existing regulation in 2014. The current action is not contested. In other words, the college's investigation and firing of the individual in 2019-20 is not under dispute. It's only what happened in 2014. And there's an immense documentation about this. There's no ambiguity about it. So it really is up to the courts to see whether or not we acted properly and as we should under state and federal law. I'm quite certain we did. The expense of administering these regulations is enormous, and it was enormous in 2014. But in any administration of human justice of any kind, there are appeals, there's due process, and there is a risk you take. And in American life, one can hold various entities responsible for what happens. Jane asked me before this about this issue, and I said, as many of you in the alumni know, that my second child was killed on Route 199 by a driver who was exceeding the speed limit. I have every right as a citizen, I chose not to, but I have every right to sue the town of Red Hook and the county to see whether they were sufficiently vigilant in enforcing the speed limit, and were they negligent in simply allowing people with impunity to drive through the town of Red Hook at excessive speed at the cost of the life of my daughter. So speaking for the victim, I have a right to seek recourse in compensation from responsible authorities. We chose not to do that. And I think actually probably if we had, we would not have won, because I think the courts would have found that there's no evidence that the town of Red Hook was responsible for the death of my daughter, that it didn't take down the signs, it didn't stop patrolling. They have a long record of giving tickets to speeders, or exceeding the speed limit in the town of Red Hook. And so, tragic as the events are, the responsible party is the driver, and not the town of Red Hook. And that the town of Red Hook acted within reason, responsibly, but none of us can promise anyone. This COVID environment is a very good example. People ask about reopening. And therefore our liability, will we ever be in a position to say to a student, you're going to be 100% safe here. You're never going to get sick, and you're not going to put yourself at risk, and we can protect you. The answer is we'll never say that because it can't be done. No matter how much testing we do, no matter how much temperature taking, no how many precautions, no how clearly we create social distancing signing, no matter how many fines we give out to students who don't wear a mask, we're not going to be able to control the environment to assure an individual that they are going to be risk-free by virtue of the college's activity. And but we're in a free society where the rule of law is a right, and I applaud the family for bringing the lawsuit, and I look forward towards proper adjudication, and the college will abide by whatever finding the due process of law provides.
Some of the people in the chat have asked me, have asked you what the alumni can do to help the college at this time.
To fight for its continued existence. So we're none of the alumni, nor I, are part of a community where we inherited our security. Harvard has inherited security, Vassar's inherited security, Williams has inherited security, Amherst has inherited Bowdoin. We have not. We have to create the security now for future generations. If you believe that what Bard does and how it does it is truly an important part of our culture. I would say that it is, not only because of the experience. I know many alumni. Our alumni is probably more critical of their alma mater than most, and I think that's a virtue. I don't think one goes to college to become a rah-rah member of a club. I don't think, that is what going to college should teach you. So alumni loyalty is not necessarily a measure of how good the education was. But alumni loyalty, because you had a good education or came of age in an important and significant way, if you believe that Bard, because it's one of the few places left standing in defense of the arts and the humanities, for example, as enrollments decline and faculties are reduced in other institutions in those fields, it stands for something. Or because you believe in the region, or you believe in our public mission. I mean, we are the most important force in the transformation of public secondary education. There were 7 public high schools, and BPI, without saying, and the international work, and what Summerscape and the Fisher Center represent. So if you believe in its mission, now, not tomorrow, is the time to support the college. My hope is that the COVID crisis will actually highlight the need to raise an endowment that can function to secure the college's well-being for decades to come.
You, Summerscape and the Bard Music Festival, can you just address some of that? People have asked me about that.
Yeah, so the announcement will be going out that the programs for the Bard Music Festival are postponed to next year. They're rescheduled for 2021. It might have been possible for us to go forward, but we have our first subject who is a woman, Nadia Boulanger, and even if we were legally able to do this, it would have been compromised. The festival wouldn't have had its full range, and I think attendance would have been minimal. So we decided it's wasted money, and so we simply transposed the events to next summer. And so to the opera that was planned to open in the middle of the summer, Le Roi Tous, Chausson's King Arthur. And in its place, Gideon Lester and Liza Parker, the new director of the Fisher Center, and others, and I, and Irene Zedlocker, the director of the Bard Music Festival, everybody's putting their heads together to come figure out something we can do in the interim in August, if permissible by the state, that is public, outdoors, in theater, dance, music, as a kind of stopgap before we enter next year. But this will be a pause in our continuity.
Well, that must be very hard for you. Is there anything that you're working on that you've been meaning to do with all your schedule, and now maybe you have time to do something you haven't been
No, I've a bunch of things I have to write, and I've agreed to write a volume for a series in music history for Yale University Press. But that I did before this happened. No, actually, running the college and doing my job on this medium is more time consuming than it was without. This is a platform that has no boundaries, and the etiquette in using it is not established, which means immediate response, rapid response, the sheer volume of stuff that people can send you by the push of a button is unimaginable. And so there is a kind of intensity to this format, which doesn't leave you a lot of free time. And also, it is emotionally draining. It's like being in a trench warfare constantly and being hammered and attacked. And you gain 3 yards and lose 2, and gain another 4 yards and lose 5, and then launch a counterattack and reclaim it, and you've lost a lot of life and time and effort. You find yourself basically in the same place. So this is not an enforced vacation.
And we will end in just a couple minutes, but I wanted to ask you, I heard that there are going to be some students who are staying on campus. Bard has committed to them because they can't get home.
Yeah. So we already did that when this pandemic struck, and then we had about 300 students, and now we're down to under 100. I suspect that some number between 50 and 100 of students will stay here for the entire summer until they can re-enroll in the fall semester. We might have some international students who got lucky and came early. We're going to invite international students who are new students or those returning, who, if they care visas, come through early and they can make early transportation arrangements, that they're welcome before. So I think we have to be very flexible in helping our students, and also students who come from families where going home or remaining home is more stressful and less beneficial than having a dormitory room here and pursuing their student life or perhaps getting some employment. So we have to be sensitive. 25% of our student body now in Annandale comes from the lowest quartile of American income. 1 out of every 4 students has a family income from the bottom quarter. And that's a far higher percentage than the number of students who come from the upper quarter. So, the image that many alumni have about the college that they graduated from and the distribution of students would be amazed, flabbergasted at the diversity of the current student body. And so we have going home doesn't symbolize a return to some upper middle class suburban household, nor one within easy driving distance of the college. So the national, international character of the enrollment requires us to be a little bit more thoughtful about how we handle the fate of students in this crisis.
Well, I think from what I've heard from students, they've all been very grateful.
Oh, they're very
what,
grateful,
what
very
the college
grateful. Yes, the
has been
international
able to
students
do.
who got stranded here are
Right.
among our biggest boosters.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of them because they're in the conservatory, so wonderful young people.
Right. Well, we've got about 3 minutes left. I want to have a chance to just thank you for doing this, and thank you for your leadership and keeping it all going. If there's anything you wanted to say, just to
No,
wrap
I
up.
thank you, Jane. I want to thank you and your staff, and I also want to thank the alumni who are on this call, and all the alumni who helped the college. And I want to urge you to help you and your fellow classmates take pride in the college and help us, and give us the benefit of the doubt as an imperfect place. We were never perfect, but I'm amazed how loyal certain alumni are to institutions that actually didn't contribute that much to their education, but in some way burnish their resume in some way. We're an institution that per capita probably has had a more constructive influence on the shape of its graduates' lives, and I think we properly should be the beneficiary of your allegiance and help. And we appreciate the Board of Governors and the alumni infrastructure. We appreciate everything that everyone does in this difficult time.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Stay safe.
Thank you.
And,
you too.
I will.
We'll do this again. We'll do this again.
Sure, absolutely. We will.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, and thanks for everybody who joined the call.